Welcome back to Where the Ramp Ends. I'm Bryce,
And I'm Summer.
and today on Where the Ramp Ends, we have featured documentary filmmaker Julie Force Wyman. We are so happy to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here with you.
If you wouldn't mind taking a few seconds to properly introduce yourself to our listeners, we would love that.
Yeah, of course. Well, to give a visual description, I am a white woman, middle-aged, shoulder-length brown hair with artificial orange streaks in it, and wearing some blue specs, sitting in front of a room with a couple windows and a bookshelf. Yeah, but, also, what you might not be able to tell is that I am also a, um, professor of filmmaking at UC Davis. I teach, in the cinema and digital media department there, and I've been making films now for 3 decades, all of which, are about very different topics, but have a through line that's about, body image and, people who have the experience of not fitting, in different ways, and how they navigate and push back against societal limitations around what society tells us about our bodies.
Amazing.
So, yeah, thanks.
And your latest project, The Tallest Dwarf, will be premiering on PBS on April 6th. And what what an amazing project that was. Do you want to just share a little bit about how that project kind of came to be?
Sure, sure. I mean, as I said, I had been making work for a while, documentaries, um, that were about different stories about people who's had this experience of not fitting, having bodies that were different and stand out in different ways. And after several of those projects, I kind of had to take a hard look at myself and say, I knew that the reason I was making that work was because of my own experience of being in a body that's different. One of the things that's different about my body is that I have shorter arms and legs and a longer torso, than average. And also I have the experience as a kid of being bullied. Not just a kid, actually it followed me into adulthood where people would ask me if I had a form of dwarfism or say something insulting related to that. And so I had this question always about whether the way my body's different related to dwarfism, if I had a form of dwarfism, if there were other people who look like me out
Sure.
there. And after making several films about other people navigating how they live in their bodies, I was like, okay, it's time to explore this issue, this question I have. And I started the film. I knew I inherited my physique from my dad and my grandma, but I didn't know what it was called or if there was anyone else like us out there. So my first step was just going to film with my dad and just kind of exploring that question with him. And when I started looking into medical definitions of dwarfism, all the kinds of dwarfism, to try to figure out if there's a form of dwarfism we might have, a door opened and literally, like, I walked in the door of Little People of America and entered a world that both became my community and also became the world of the film. My question about do I have dwarfism opened up into a much bigger question about what is Little People community? What does it mean to film in Little People community, to join Little People community with the camera?
Right.
And how do I want to sit with the problems of that question, right? If little people, I intuitively knew, and then I've learned as I've made the film, just there's this huge legacy of little people being gawked at treated as specimens and spectacles and having our picture taken without consent. Being bullied is just the beginning, really.
Right.
Um, and so I wanted to make sure that my film did something very different with the way I thought about asking people and involving people, the little people who, again, like, became my friends and community, to be in this film. So that became kind of the question of the film, not just, are there people like me? Can I connect? But what does it mean to show ourselves? And can we have some autonomy, and can we take control, or at least try to creatively, um, yeah, navigate how we're seen?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
kind of allow that community to be seen in their terms.
That's right.
Yes.
Exactly.
So I found it just really touching because you see the story where you find yourself, but more than that, you're also finding your community, like you talked about. And you just really you can see the connection with your community. What did that really mean to you to be able to find that connection with somebody, with others like that?
I mean, it meant a lot. It's super meaningful to find people that have a shared experience, especially when that experience has been really, first of all, very personal and had a certain degree of, like, pain and uncertainty around it, but also is private, like, is a thing you don't have anyone to talk to exactly about. So, I think there's, especially as a little person living without a little people community, there's a kind of closet in a way of, like, okay, I'm just gonna hold these certain kinds of experiences, or these certain ways that I have to respond to people's questions or looks, or the way things in the world don't fit me, um, and not have, even someone who understands that exactly from living it.
Right. Sure, sure, sure.
So finding community is, like, it's actually about, for me, having the unspoken connection, like the unspoken understanding,
Sure.
just being in a group of people that I know have had similar experiences, and, we'll have each other's backs if anything comes up that needs advocacy, but also just, like, we carry these experiences with us, I think, through our lives. And to just know that, um I know and am with people that have certain similar experiences around specifically having dwarfism, having a body that has different proportion, that moves and looks differently. But also, people in my film have a sense of autonomy, pride, like, really fill out their skins, you know what I mean? Like, really have found comfort in each
Sure.
in their own way. For the most part, I think that's, the people I was drawn to. And so I think that's important too, is both for me to, for us to reflect that back and forth to each other.
What's the
Because even before I knew I had hypochondroplasia, dwarfism, I did a lot of work as an artist and as just a person in the world to kind of try to accept and see the beauty in myself and other people, like, that don't fit the narrow mold. And that's exactly why I started making film, was to share that with the world too. So, yeah.
what's the biggest thing that you learned about yourself as you were filming this documentary?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I've learned a lot of things about myself, that have to do with with filmmaking. Honestly, this project was, took a long time, and it's sort of a luxury to be able to take 10 years on making a film. I think, so I feel like I've learned about myself as an artist, and the way, um, you know needing support and to share the process
Right.
with collaborators is really crucial. So some of the collaborations I've had have been so revelatory and have helped make something that I could never have made. So I've learned about just that's more for on the filmmaker side, like building and finding a team and different ways of working with different collaborators has been really exciting. I think personally, something, well, and maybe I'll say another thing that's artistic was that there was an impulse that I had to pull my story out of the film. Like, I felt like the community story is so
Right.
much more
Sure, sure,
important than
sure.
mine. It is. It's higher stakes. I'm just one person, you know, trying to figure out this personal thing.
Sure.
And then when you see there's a whole community with a whole history and a whole future, you know, it's bigger stakes. And so there were times when I was like, let's get the Julie story out. Let's kind of like not have that take up too much space. But one thing I learned to, you know, this is one of the biggest revelations in making the film was that my perspective, like the story of me coming to this community, is exactly what lets the audience be with the community in a
Yeah.
way that's different from when
Yeah.
the film has sort of an outsider voyeuristic perspective,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
I agree. Like
Absolutely.
I I see that because I do feel like I was able to see the community through your eyes and to really like appreciate that support that you were receiving and that they just like embraced you and supported you. And so I think showing them through your eyes really helps everybody on the outside really appreciate that community for who they
Yes.
are.
Yeah, it kinda gives a different reason to be there, I think, because I think I know that there's such a, you know, there's such a legacy of little people being, you know, interesting oddities and, you know, fascinating for people to look at, and that's exactly what I wanted to counter, and I guess what I'm saying is I didn't realize that my perspective was what would allow the film to offer something different.
You bring up a
You know, I
you bring up a valid point because a lot of times, in movies and in shows, the little people community are usually portrayed in such a negative way. It's almost like, they're, you know, they they don't really get the respect that they deserve. It's almost like it's like you said, it's almost like an oddity or like something to gawk at. And I think it's beautiful that you're trying to reverse the narrative. Not a lot of people are willing to get in those kind of spaces and rewrite the framework. So what you're doing is really bold because to rewrite the narrative, especially in a, a community that is such taboo by so many people, it's very bold. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with the disability community, like what Summer and I are doing. Very similar when she approached me with this idea, having somebody with lived experience and having somebody with able-bodied experience. It's not been done. So you writing the story on the other side of the coin of the little person community, what you're doing is you're giving that community a voice that's never been spoken.
I mean, I don't, you know, I try to also work against being or seeing myself as some kind of savior coming in because
No,
really I just want to be part of the community. You know, I'm not
absolutely.
trying to be like, let
Yes.
me do what you couldn't do for yourself. I don't look at
No,
it that way
right.
at all. But I do look at it as you know, what you're saying, that legacy, I think there's different kinds of like negative ways, and
Oh,
sometimes
sure.
they skew positive, you know, because people are like, I love little people. I love people have this
Right.
weird
Right.
fetishistic way. Like I
I
think
was
with
trying
certain
to say that, but I didn't
disabilities,
know how to say it respectfully. I was like, they have this weird stigma with like, oh, I love little people. They're so fun. They're so, oh. I just want to put them in my pocket. Like, no, don't say that. Like, oh no, like, ooh, no.
Well, that's yeah, and the ooh part is like I think what I want to make obvious. And I think when you get the opportunity to like sit at a writer's room, like a little writer's room table with us and hear us like laughing at the ableism, like to me, that's the thing I hope, people can walk away
Right.
with is
Sure.
taking LP and disabled humor and seeing that the funny thing here is not us. The funny thing is you or this gaze that wants to that looks at us as some kind of like magical creature or
Yeah.
deformity or like puts us in these terms that are so from the outside and so limited and
Yes.
so just wrong.
Unfortunately, I myself have gotten the stare, when I've gone out with people or I've, you know, gone to eat and I've had people come up to me and come up to people in my family and they're like, good for you getting him out today. I'm so happy that he got out. And I'm like, really, asshole? Like, I'm, I am just as capable of, you know, going out and enjoying my life just like you. Just because I sit does not mean that I'm not entitled to go to a sports bar and have a burger and a beer and enjoy my evening. Like that's not.
Yeah. Yeah, and the talking to the other people, right, is the other
Yes.
part,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Like
Yes.
congratulating them, like what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julie, what conversations do you hope this film starts with parents that not just
That's
of
a great
parents
question.
that of children that have dwarfism, but parents that have children with disabilities?
I mean, I'll start by saying I'm not a parent and so much respect for all of you who are. I know it is the biggest responsibility one can have, and it's complicated and, everyone navigates it, um, their way and does their best, So just want to put that out there first is like thanks to the parents for parenting. I I think that oftentimes I think I'm hoping that parents of disabled kids, but also just all parents can kind of consider how and whether they can give a form of acceptance that their kid needs, and also maybe a form of community or connection
Mhm.
that they can't provide themselves.
Yes. That's great.
I think sometimes it's about understanding, like I wonder if it's hard for parents to understand the limits of what they can actually do if they don't have the lived experience that their kid does. Meaning they're doing so much, you're doing so much, you're not to downplay that at all, but you haven't walked in the shoes or the sat in the chair that your kid is in. And
Yes.
um so for them to find other adults who have, other people their age that have, I'm hoping, that and that's I think that's true for not just, like I said, disabled kids, but like if your kid is queer or trans or it's just kind of like when our kids have passions and interests of certain things, like how can
Right.
you support that and let them go further? It's the same kind of thing. So I would love it if parents could kind of see that. But I think the other message I would love for parents to take away is kind of the arc of the film is my parents starting from not understanding and saying they don't know what I mean by my question about needing to know what my dwarfism is. And then at the end, spoiler alert, my dad simply says, I understand because I felt the same way as you. And like, that's so huge, and it's so small. It's like sometimes it's just this very small kind of, "I get you." That is all we need, I think, it's all kids need, right? To not build into this silo of like, "I'm so
Right.
alone with this."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I did love watching your journey with your parents throughout the film also. Not just I mean, I did comment on watching you with your new community and how beautiful that was, but yes, your journey with your parents was very sweet.
I mean, you
Um,
as a mom, I'm curious how that like, what kind of ways you either, um, resonated or
Well,
or
that's a
felt
good
really
question.
different from your experience. I'm curious.
I I I did resonate with, it's kind of like, I received my daughter's diagnosis when I was 20 weeks pregnant. And so there was this diagnosis and, like your child's going to have Down syndrome. And I went through I went through denial. It didn't last very long. Kind of went through the whole, well, maybe they're wrong, maybe, it's a false. But
Diagnosis.
then I was able to get to where I embraced it and I dove in. My husband struggled a little bit more, but my husband also had an uncle that had Down syndrome and he was institutionalized. And so my husband was coming from a place where he had seen somebody in an institution and that was really hard for him. Um, I didn't have that memory in my head. So I dove in and just, I was all about how can I make her life the best as possible and how can I embrace this diagnosis? And so I think my because I had a diagnosis and it was clear where I think your mom might have been in denial for a long time um because well, I mean, for whatever reason, for whatever reason, but I think I think you getting a diagnosis seemed to be important not only for you but for your parents to be able to them to maybe connect to you a little bit more instead of just living in this shadow of denial. I don't
Yes.
know if that.
Yeah, I mean, I describe it a lot as kind of a generational difference and a different world, a little bit of a different worldview where for my mom, I think it's a little bit like if because my dwarfism is, because I'm a tall dwarf and I'm in that sort of in between space, right? Where and Ellen says to me in the film, you can blend in easier than we can. And it's true.
Yes.
Right. So and I think my mom's and her generation's worldview is, well, if you can blend in, then do. That's what you should do. You don't need to draw attention to a
Right.
difference. Just
Right.
either ignore it when it's something that you don't have to pay attention to, don't. I mean, I think the question is what makes you have to, right? Like maybe it was, for me, it felt necessary because I knew it had informed my entire life into my 40s, even though it was the degree that it is, which is less than, I have a degree of privilege, I would say, over a lot of LPs in terms of needing less accommodations in the world. Like I can drive a car without foot pedal extensions added, etc. So I think for her, that was, I talk about being an in-betweener and I talk about my dwarfism as kind of this shimmery quality. Like all my life, I'm like, do I have it or don't I? Do I, don't I? I can't tell.
Right.
Sometimes it seems so obvious. Other times I feel like maybe I'm imagining it. And I think my mom's, uh, sort of response was a little bit like, "Well, then it's not real. Just don't worry about it." And my response was like, "But it keeps being real. I think it's there. I need to name and know this." And so it's kind of two different ways of looking at it. And I wasn't like I say in the film, it's not about finding a problem I'm gonna fix, but it's about knowing something about myself
Yes.
and why I have this, why things are a little different. And, there's actually a mutation in every cell of my body.
Right.
And knowing that is sort of powerful to just be like, oh, and that's why my hips were hurting. And that's why my pants
Yeah.
have never fit my whole life, or, um, just all these kinds of things, just understanding the why and the mechanism of it. Yeah. And the community part, right? Which we've talked about a lot.
Sure.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me into another topic in this film that I'd like to talk about is they talk about when, and I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, when the doctor is able to identify that chromosome. And then also there's a part where they talk about surgery. And I really like that, really caught my attention right now in the Down syndrome community. It just came out that they are able to actually, they're working on research to do away with that extra chromosome to
Wow. Like
fix
gene
Down,
editing.
yes, to
Yeah.
fix Down
Wow.
syndrome.
Wow.
And there's a lot of talk, like if I could go back and change my child, would I? I personally like I'm just, and there's a quote in there a doctor makes, and I wish I'd written this down. I'm sorry.
No, it's
He
okay.
said
I can probably tell you what it is, but go
he's
ahead.
he says, but what if that's there for a purpose? And what if that's there for a purpose? And and we're just not smart enough to realize it. And that's how I kind of feel. It's like it's all there for a purpose. But that's the conversation that's going on in the Down syndrome community. And it seems like that's kind of going on in your community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's the scientist John Wasmuth who discovered the gene for achondroplasia, the most common form of dwarfism, and in 1994 he he had big he had big sort of doubts or worries about what this knowledge was going to mean. Exactly this question of, I mean, he, you're referring, like he says, what if that gene is there for a reason and we just don't fully understand? Or what if like removing it or undoing it has other effects that we don't understand yet? And it's almost like a spiritual perspective that this scientist has. It's an
Yes.
ethical perspective. And I like reading that article really like rocked my world. I was like, okay, this has to be in the film somehow. Um, but it's also, you know, I think I guess what it made me think about, like, we don't necessarily know all the workings and we won't, right? Science always makes these discoveries and doesn't have the full picture yet and never will
Right.
because it continues going. So, but it's also like we do know some things and we do know that, like, you know, there's a value to diversity, right? Just plain and simple. There's a value to to the different kinds of people, bodies, minds that we have in this world. And I think, that it's easy to just want everyone to be like the best or the most normal or something like that. Um, and it's like, I think I want people to have the question. I have the question, what do we lose? And I think we lose a
Right.
lot, and I wouldn't ever tell anyone,
Right.
don't get this procedure that you want. It's their choice, it's your choice,
Right.
whatever. But like, what does it mean if we're becoming more and more similar? And,
Point in your film where during the duration of you filming, you're like, why am I doing this? Why, I, why, why, why am I even taking the time to worry about this? Why am I spending so much time? Is it even worth it? And can you tell me like the thoughts that you were having during those times of self doubt? Because we all have moments in our lives where we're like, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I putting this out because I truly want to put this out? Or should I even do this? Tell me what was going through your mind in those moments of despair.
I worked on this film for 11 years and I
Oh, yeah.
definitely had moments of despair and moments of uncertainty and insecurity. Um, you know, there were lots of phases of it. I would say one is literally like, are people going to care about this story?
Right.
Especially the part about me personally. I'm like, why does anyone need to know this? I think that was up against this kind of burning, like, this has been what's motivated all my film work. And so it's important and I need to go there. So that would be up against, there's a certain, I always had a knowledge like, I'm going to finish this. I just will. I have to. But that was up against a lot of doubt at times about who this is relevant to, why it matters. It's such a personal story. It's such a quirky story. And being someone who's a disabled person, but with a degree of privilege, like, am I disabled enough? Like, that's a question. Like, there's certain people in the disability community who have welcomed me in and said, we want you and you're a part of us and be here. But there was a long period of time where I wasn't quite sure. And that's a reality that there's still always that sense, like I say at the
Yes.
open mic, I'm different than all of you. Um, so, so that was one thing. And then, fundraising is just so hugely, it just takes so much. And you're constantly having to present yourself as like, everything you're doing, when often I knew I would get there, but I didn't have the answers for exactly how are you going to
Right.
connect
Sure,
this
sure,
story
sure.
of the community's pharma questions with your story with your dad. And I was like, I know I'll do it, but I couldn't explain it. So there was that, like, having to present along the way that was quite difficult, especially with such a personal story. Like, I don't want to convince you that this story
Right.
about my body is worthwhile because I'm having to go deep into the cave of creativity to find it. But you have to do that when you're an independent filmmaker. You have to continuously search for funding and support. And, I also think, let's see, I mean, there was a lot of concern. There was a lot of worry that I had that I really didn't want to. I really didn't want to misrepresent people, and I really didn't want to replicate the problems of how little people have been fetishized and put on
Right.
display.
Right.
And it was sort of my nightmare all along. Like, I'm like, I do not want to have like the Julie story with little people backup dancers. Like, that's can't be what this is. And it is a Julie's story. But I'm not gonna. I'm just to answer your question. There were really creative moments of like, how do we balance this all? And it took a long
Yes.
time to edit it so that it came to feeling like people were representing themselves on their own terms. It felt honest and true and authentic, and enough of like the presence of the community and individuals that it satisfied that worry for me, you know?
And for me, I sympathize with you because I also feel like I'm a disabled person with a little bit of privilege because uh the only thing that my cerebral palsy affected was my motor skills. I was able to go to college and achieve a degree, and become a public speaker and a life coach, but at the same time, society still holds that weight on me of, oh, he's in a chair. We're not gonna book him because I I don't get as many opportunities as an able-bodied person would. But at the same time, people don't look at me as a disabled person a lot. They can have one conversation with me and be like, "Oh, so he's not very disabled." I'm like, "No, I am. Just everything is right upstairs. I just sit." But that's the cognition of why I decided to get into this space, because prior to me becoming a public speaker and a life coach, I wanted nothing to do with the disability community. I wanted to move out to
Interesting.
California. I wanted to move out to California and become an actor. That's what I
Yeah.
wanted to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't see anybody in films that had a disability. I wanted to be the first one to kind of break the mold and be, and hope that, my disability was going to magically disappear. Obviously, it didn't. But, it took me years to embrace my own community. And I found that the reason why I was in the chair had been screaming at me in the face for all of my life. Because my dad used to say that you can't bitch about your life unless you're willing to sit at the table and be a part of the conversation. If you're not willing to do that, you have no room to talk. So when I finally decided to be a part of the solution, rather than blaming my disability on why my life sucked, my life got easier.
I love that. That's really great to hear your story and also to hear about your discovery and like coming
Yes,
to disability community, to disabled identity. I mean,
yes,
I think the thing about us and about disability community that I love so much is that it's a coalition community.
it
It's
is.
a like there's so many kinds of disabilities. There's invisible disabilities. There's, you know, and and yet what we all have in common is not so much like what our disability affects in our life, but
Right.
the way we're looked at, right?
Yes.
And coming up against ableism, really. I think that's the one of the biggest through lines for us all, and to different ways and degrees. And so and that's the whole point of joining together and be like, let's address this, let's fight
Yes.
it, let's change the fact that you haven't seen anyone. I mean, I still want you to go be an actor if that's what you want to do.
Ri
um
Absolutely. That's I have a lot of different business ventures that I want to do. Summer and I eventually want to do a children's book series on, how able-bodied people can make friends with all layers of disability community. We want to lay the framework for to let the disability community kind of have a spotlight, and because for the longest time we didn't, you know,
yeah,
anything in society, the disability community was not really represented in a positive way. It was always kind of in the background. And I'm sorry, I've never been one to be in the background. I've always wanted to be and to show off and be like, no,
yeah,
I have cerebral
I'm
palsy, but
here.
that doesn't define who I am. It's a part of me.
You're a person with a lot to share and offer.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's interesting too, because people ask me a lot about like language, like what should I call little people, or even the kind of ways that people say like,
I'm a person.
but also people say like, yeah, exactly, just by their name, please. um
Yes.
but I guess what I'm saying is disability, the word is, it has dis means like apart or not or
Yes.
something. So it's kind of like I think we as individuals and a community reclaim that word, and we're like, we take it, and it stands for our togetherness. It stands for our not our without, not our apart from. But I think people outside the community that don't know about it are like, say things like, "Oh, I don't think you have you have an ability, not a disability." And it's like those kind of messages can really undermine, like they come from a a kind place, but
Yes.
they are not seeing
Yes.
us. And also they're kind of bringing in like, I don't think you're disabled, because that would be so bad if you were disabled. It's like, well,
Why?
no, not really. It's actually just like, say it, be it. It's, let's
Yeah.
own it. I mean, that's, I think there's a lot of moments in the film where I hope that message comes across too. Like we
I
kind of
don't know if
own.
I don't know if Summer remembers this, but it was one of our first conversations in Partners in Policy, making where we met, and I had answered the topic, and I said, you know, if I was able-bodied and with all the certifications and the degrees that I have, I there would be no reason why I wouldn't be making over six figures. And Summer said to me, she was like, "Why aren't you?" She was like, "Your disability shouldn't waver on how much, society, allows you to make. Like, you are intelligent enough to be touring all around the world being, a public speaker and a life coach. Why haven't you?" And I'm like, because society wants to lower the standard for people with a disability, because then people's mindset would have to change on the disability community. And it's not just cerebral palsy, it's the little people community, it's people with Down syndrome. People's perception of the disability community would have to change. And it's not our perception, it's the able-bodied perception.
Yeah, and I think in some ways that is also why maybe why you do what you're doing with your podcast, and certainly why I do what I'm doing, because I just think it's a question of exposure, honestly.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it's like
Yeah.
people just need to meet, listen, spend time, and get a sense of like the humans, the characters, the
Yes.
complexities of our
Yeah.
life and the realness, and just that category and the negative stigma of it just dissolves.
1000%.
Yeah.
Julie,
Yeah.
what do you hope a young person with dwarfism feels after watching your film?
I mean, I hope I inspire artists and filmmakers to tell their stories, to make the images they see in their minds, and capture the histories that are around us and that are part of our world and community, and put those out so that there is more to look
Right.
at and read, because I'm just one perspective and example. So I would love for any young aspiring artists and filmmakers, particularly little people and in the disability community, to like, take this as a like, I can do it, I want to do it, I have a way I want to show it and tell it. That's one thing. I
Yeah.
think another is, I know a lot of adults relate, but I think maybe younger viewers do too, with like the part of the film that's about my my adolescent and teenage diaries,
Yes.
and how
Yes.
like I was so trapped in a cycle of like wanting to be something I wasn't, and
Yeah.
just how
Absolutely.
painful that is. And so I tried to reflect that in like just the very real painful trap of it. And I hope that for people that are in that, like at any age, but especially for young people, that the film kind of gives some perspective to like, oh, this is, other people feel this way. She felt that way and came through, and uh I there's it gets better. I guess that's
Yeah.
one of the messages
Yeah.
too, is I hope that people feel their experience reflected, but also the sense that how it can get better is hopefully there's films like mine and more of them, where there can be beautiful people of all shapes and sizes, right? Where we can really like make space to see that, so that we're not trapped in the like, if I don't look like this, I'm not okay.
Right.
I'm not good
Right.
enough. I have to fix myself. So I hope young people can get the message that they're okay, they're great, and they just need to find the way to see that. It's really a way of seeing. So I'm hope that even if it's not a conscious like, oh, I learned a new way of seeing, I hope people with this 90-minute experience can come away with that in their mind and heart, that they've seen people in a way that maybe they could see themselves.
I love how you worded that, a 90-minute experience, because I think a lot of people have experienced, being young and being trapped in a feeling and emotion, and they're like, I wish my life was easier. And I myself have been there, and it took me to getting to the age where I am. I mean, I'm 29 now, but I look back at, the things that I struggled with at 14, 15 years old, wondering why, being mad at the world for being put in the chair, and wondering why is dating so difficult, as a young person. And I realized, as older as I got, the problem was with me, essentially. I had to accept who I was and be okay with me. And I think
Yeah.
the thing that is going to be so powerful with this film is you went on a journey to find you, and you found other people that were like you along the way, and it set you free. That's the biggest thing that I got from the film, is it allowed you to finally be free.
Yeah. I love that. See, this is what the answer should be when people ask me your question. You just answered it better for me. But it's so true, Bryce. It's like, it's right. You're right. That's absolutely right. There is, we have that phrase that Sophia says, and it's on our posters. What does it mean to liberate your body? And, this is what the film's about, is liberating, like finding a kind of freedom through, through this connection, through this reflection back. Yeah.
I think that it kind of leads into my final two questions for you. What's the biggest thing that you've learned through this entire process about yourself filming this project? And what's the biggest piece of advice you could go back and tell a younger version of Julie and say,
Yeah.
I got you?
I love that. Um, I think it is, you'll find your people. Your people are out there. You'll find them, you know? Um, just knowing, and by that I mean partly the people you meet in the film, but I also mean friends and community I've had up into that point, maybe people that will be my community in the future, that are the people that kind of help and support and reflect back uh, those parts of myself that I felt ashamed of and needed to learn to find the pride and the ownership of.
Completely.
So, and I was going to say just about the last thing you were mentioning about like you had to go through your own process and not blame the world. I actually think it's kind of like for me, like the sort of freedom is kind of both sides of that. It is
Right.
recognizing that there is ableism and there is a systemic
Yes.
way that we're looked at. And so it's not just something I'm imagining, and it's not just something that came
Yes.
from one bad guy. It
Yes.
actually is in the air that we all
Yes.
breathe. And knowing that that's real, it's kind of like that's the thing that needs a gene test or a
Attention.
diagnosis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's
Yes.
hard
Yes.
fact that there is ableism in our world. And so when you understand that, then you can, for me, the two things are intertwined. Understanding that helps me be freed up to find my own freedom, comfort, and pride,
Yes.
Yeah. I think your next documentary project is the power of ableism. I think, how creating a film on how powerful ableism is on our society and how much of a hold it has on society.
I mean, I think I'd like to do more comedy, like more like can we knock it down by
Right.
laughing at it?
Like
Sure.
Because I
Sure.
actually think that's a pretty good way to get at some of these.
Yes.
do
Yeah.
do
I'm
you have any projects coming up that you want to talk about?
I do have one really exciting project that's related to the Tallest Dwarf. So in the Tallest Dwarf, you watch a group of little people, performing artists, and I creating these short films. And you see a couple like 1 minute excerpts of two of them.
Sure.
The short films are done, and they're going to have their world premiere at the Real Abilities Film Festival in New York on
Oh,
April 27th. So I could give
Very
you guys
nice.
the link to the website, and if anyone's in New York, and actually they do I think they have a virtual component to their festival, and they also tour some of their films. So anyway, people could
okay.
follow us and find out.
That's
Um,
amazing.
Yeah,
yeah,
we'll
so
share.
that's one project that's just about out into the world, that is kind of the next step of like, what did we do all together? Now you can see the
Right.
actual
Yeah,
films. So it's 3
yeah.
short films that we made. Yeah, and
That's awesome.
I'm other things are just kind of too I'm in the thick of them, but I have a couple of other projects. I'm in the one I'm editing, uh, and one I'm producing, with another director. That it's another personal story that has to do with a genetic mutation and how, but it's very different, totally different, not about dwarfism at all. It's very much about like, but it also is a critique of misogyny and sexism within the medical world. So,
Yes.
Wow.
um, I'm continuing this kind of work in these themes, and we'll probably be working on it for a few more years at least, or more, probably more, since this is my calling in life, I guess, to dive
Oh
into and
yeah,
tell these stories.
you've got plenty of gas in the tank still.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you.
So, for our listeners, can you tell us how they can watch The Tallest Dwarf and then also follow your upcoming work?
Absolutely. So The Tallest Dwarf will be on PBS on the show called Independent Lens, beginning on April 6th. And what I can do is provide some links for you, but just there's 3 ways to watch it on PBS. One is through the TV broadcast. So if you tune in to PBS on regular old TV, cable TV or whatever, you can look up when Independent Lens is being shown. It's supposed to premiere April 6th, but different areas might broadcast it at different times of day,
Okay.
or even the next day or something. But besides that one time, there's also the film will be available up until July 4th on PBS's new YouTube channel. So if you just go to YouTube and look up PBS, and again, I'll give you the link. The film will be available and free for everyone to watch for 3 months. And if you have a smart TV with apps or a Roku, you can get the PBS app, which is also, you don't have to subscribe. It's a free, you don't have to pay for a membership to access the film for the next 3 months. There is a subscription you can get, Passport, to continue, but some of their programs are just available freely. And this is one. The Tallest Dwarf is available on the PBS app April 6th through July 4th. So, yeah,
Amazing.
and I can
Amazing.
provide that in writing and links so you could include it. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
and then
gee,
also you can follow the film on Instagram and Facebook at The Tallest Dwarf Film, all one word, The Tallest Dwarf Film. And then, I'm also on Instagram personally, Julie Forrest Wyman. So
okay.
check out, I'm going to be putting out stories about the making of the film over the next few months, and also news about, any local screenings or events we have. So
Sure.
follow me on all those places. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today. And before we leave, do you have any last words you want to say to our listeners?
Just so glad to be able to join this podcast and be part of a wide conversation about disability, our culture, our identity, history, our confrontation and resistance of ableism. And so, I hope that this film and our conversation is helping people think about and dig into some of these topics and questions. And we need more. So if you're a
Yes.
storyteller, get it out there. Tell your story, write your story, draw your story. make your music. I just want to encourage anyone who's listening that has a story, message, or image to share to do it, to get it out there.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely encourage all our listeners and beyond to check out The Tallest Dwarf, premiering on PBS on April 6th.
Thank
Yes,
you.
and with that, Bryce, I'll let you sign us off.
And for that, this has been Where the Ramp Ends. I'm Bryce.
And I'm Summer.
This is Where the Ramp Ends and where your journey begins. Till next time, bye-bye.